Humza, he's not without his political gifts, but he does also have a talent for just handing cheap wins to his opponents. So some of the stuff that he said today, I mean, talking about how you should have, a parliament of constructive opponents, you shouldn't have a parliament of enemies. Well, that line is just a gift that's going to keep biting him on the backside. This kind of muddies the waters. I mean, we need to see how they clarify. Humza very quickly needs to get a narrative for what the SNP is for. He needs to do that ahead of the coming general election, but also ahead of the Scottish parliamentary elections.
So what do you make of this then? What does this, for people looking from the outside, what does this tell us about the state of Scottish politics?
Well, I think the first thing to note is that it's a move that's been born out of weakness rather than born out of strength. I think Humza was facing quite a lot of blowback from within his own party. He didn't really have the stomach to gut this out, and he was worried that the Greens were taking the power sharing deal to their members to be endorsed or rescinded. The Green co-leader Patrick Harvey did a round of the Sunday TV shows and basically said he didn't know which way that vote would go. That was sparked by the fact that some ambitious climate change targets had they dumped them. So it was a case of, typical teenage boy, you don't get to dump me, I'm dumping you first. So in terms of the chaos of today, it is a bit chaotic and it does show a sign of weakness. In the longer term, I'm not entirely sure that this actually doesn't suit both parties well. Because the power sharing agreement wasn't really working for either of them. It was born out of a slightly different political time. It was born out of Nicola Sturgeon wanting to have and be able to say she had a pro-independence majority in the Scottish Parliament so that she could push for another referendum. And everybody and their, the dogs in the street in Scotland know that another referendum's not around the corner at the moment. Cost of living crisis, rebuilding the NHS after COVID, having good opportunities for your children. That's the main political concerns right now. It's not independence. So yeah, it's I think in the longer term, it might do both the SNP and the Greens good, but today, I mean, it's a complete burach, and it's certainly not a velvet divorce. The Greens are furious.
And in terms of, given what's happening certainly in the polls and Labour neck and neck with the SNP, for the SNP to show that they have a purpose beyond independence and a reason for them to be the anti-Tory vote rather than the Labour Party. I mean, obviously, the Scottish Parliament was set up for, it was expected to be involving sort of coalitions, and no one was supposed to win. The SNP sort of broke it. But will that job of demonstrating a purpose for the SNP be harder now, not having a majority?
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll see. Like, this kind of muddies the waters. I mean, we need to see how they clarify. Humza very quickly needs to get a narrative for what the SNP is for. He needs to do that ahead of the coming general election, but also ahead of the Scottish parliamentary elections, which are due in 2025. So 26, sorry. So he's only got a couple of years to do that. And also, the Tories are the main opposition party, but actually because Labour's on a charge and a lot of the narratives about a Labour rise, they need to re-establish themselves as the people holding the SNP to account. So there's a lot of jostling for position going on there. Labour also has to find out what it's for, not just who it's against. Okay, it's not the SNP and it's not the Tories, but what are you? What are you going to do? How are you going to make Scotland better? And I'm not sure Anas Sarwar, the leader in Scotland, has quite got that narrative down yet either. And Humza, he's not without his political gifts, but he does also have a talent for just handing cheap wins to his opponents. So some of the stuff that he said today, I mean, talking about how you should have, a parliament of constructive opponents, you shouldn't have a parliament of enemies. Well, that line is just a gift that's going to keep biting him on the backside, especially when the official Green response in their press release after they got dumped today was to use words like political cowardice, selling out future generations, that Humza is weak, he's thoroughly hopeless, he can no longer be trusted. You know what I mean? Like, it's like that sounds like something an enemy would say. That doesn't sound like a constructive thing.
Yeah.
And also that, the budget's coming up, the budget negotiations, and at the time at which this not coalition, but this agreement was made, this power sharing agreement was made, the Greens got the speakership. That tied the Parliament, 64 SNP to 64 opposition parties. The SNP have lost a member to Alba, Ash Regan, who stood in the leadership against Humza. They've also suspended a member, Fergus Ewing, who incidentally was suspended for saying that he backed the call of no confidence in the other Green co-leader, Lorna Slater, which, it turns out you could be suspended for the SNP for not having confidence in Lorna Slater, but then go on to kick Lorna Slater out of government because you have no confidence in Lorna Slater. Yeah, exactly. So I don't know what Humza's going to do about Fergus's membership. And the real worry for Humza is there is a queen across the water. The third member of the leadership election, called Kate Forbes, who was very much not the continuity candidate, who was running kind of against Nicola Sturgeon's legacy, ran him really closer than anybody thought. She just had a baby. She was still breastfeeding. She was like on maternity leave trying to run a campaign. And Humza had the full weight of Nicola Sturgeon's machine behind him. And he still only got 52% of the vote to her 48. And as a former finance minister, she's got a lot of credibility. She's socially conservative, so very much away from some of the agenda that Humza's been posting. I would say more socially conservative than the rump of her party and even the social conservative wing of her party. So that would be a readjustment. But the idea when you take a leader out the back and quietly dispose of them is that you need to have something better to replace them with. And a lot of people within the SNP think they've got a ready-made successor who is smarter, more adroit, has more credibility, and is more of an adult in the room than Humza Yousaf is, and looks more.
Yeah, they've tried the
like a
continuity, and they've
exactly.
And so they need to try something else. Ruth, always good to speak to you. Ruth Davidson, their former leader of the Scottish Conservatives.
Good morning, everyone. And when it comes to our agreement with the Scottish Green Party, I believe that the benefits have outweighed the compromises. When I said that the agreement was worth its weight in gold, I meant it. However, it is now my judgment that the balance has shifted. The Bute House Agreement was intended to provide stability to the Scottish Government, and it has made possible a number of achievements, but it has served its purpose. I believe that going forward, it is in the best interests of the people of Scotland to pursue a different arrangement. That is why, following a discussion with my cabinet this morning, I have formally notified Patrick Harvie and Lorna Slater that I am terminating the Bute House Agreement with immediate effect. I also made clear to them that my intention is that our respective parties continue to work together where we can in the national interest. Significantly, we are resolute in our determination to give the people of Scotland a say on their constitutional future, which of course Westminster parties continue to deny the people. And that then brings me to what happens next. Having laid the foundations for my priorities in government over the last 13 years, we will now step up our ambition, but we will do so as a minority government. That will be tough. We will seek to work not just with the Scottish Greens, but with MSPs from across the chamber. The SNP has, of course, governed as a minority for most of our time in office.
You've said you've decided to end this, but let's be honest, you did this, you announced this to get in front of the Greens because it's better to do the breaking up than be dumped, isn't it?
I wouldn't know, but personally, I have to say, highly focused on the people of Scotland's priorities. I have to go because it is now time for me to get to. It was sudden.